Good afternoon. My name is Kevin Carr, and this is my second speech, my informative speech for public speaking class 100. Last month, August 28th, marked the 50th anniversary of one of the greatest moments in American history. Also, the largest demonstration ever seen and first ever covered extensive television coverage. It also introduced one of the most influential persons in American history. The event that I'm speaking of is the Civil Rights March on Washington, 1963. Allow me to give you a little bit of background of that march. 1963 was noted for racial unrest and civil rights demonstrations. Nationwide outrage was sparked by media coverage in Birmingham, Alabama, with attack dogs on protesters. Fire hoses was used as well. Martin Luther King Jr. was arrested, which he wrote his most famous letters from Birmingham City Jail, which advocated civil rights, disobedience against unjust laws. Other demonstrations took place across the country, from California to New York, culminating in the March on Washington. President Kennedy backed the Civil Rights Act, which was stalled in Congress by that summer. Other coalitions was represented at the march. The Civil Rights organization, which all had different approaches. They were the Big Six organizers: James Farmer of the Congress of Racial Equality, CORE; Martin Luther King Jr., Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC; John Laws of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC; Philip Randolph of Brotherhood and Sleeping Car Porters; Roy Wilkins, NAACP; and Whitney Young Jr., better known as Andrew Young, National Urban League. And the reason for the march were the passage of meaningful civil rights legislation, eliminating racial discrimination in public schools, protection for demonstrators against police brutality, a major public works program to provide jobs, the passage of laws prohibiting racial discrimination in public and private hiring. Also a $2 an hour minimum wage and a self-government for the District of Columbia, which had a black majority. But the march was met with oppositions. President Kennedy originally discouraged the march, feared that it might make the legislative vote against civil rights laws. Other groups opposed the march. You had the KKK. Malcolm X called it the Fifth Seat on Washington, and Nation of Islam. But the march, on August 28th, 1963, an estimated 250,000 people, about a quarter of whom were white, marched from the Washington Monument to the Lincoln Memorial. Heavy police presence turned out. The march was covered by media with live international television coverage. The event had musical performances, as well as speakers from the Big Six civil rights leaders, and one female speaker by the name of Josephine Baker, who introduced several Negro women fighters for freedom, including Rosa Parks. But the march had two noteworthy speeches. That day, John Lewis and Martin Luther King Jr. But Martin Luther King's speech remains one of the most famous speeches in American history. He started with prepared remarks saying he was there to cash a check for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But then he departed from his script, shifting it into I have a dream, drawing both the American dream and a religious theme. Speaking of America, which his children would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. He followed this with Let Freedom Ring across the nation and concluded with, and when this happens, we will allow freedom to ring. We will let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city. We'll be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men, white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants, Catholics, will be able to join hands in singing sing the words of a Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty